Speaking of bearing fruit, last week on Saturday, Andrew Sterling was baptized. Amazing story. He came out of the water, and just so you know, Andrew's like a really awesome, can choose to be extroverted introvert.
Yes.
He came out of the water shouting amen or something awesome. Look at that introvert go, it's like awesome. It just takes one to know one. I am an introvert. I know you don't believe that, but I am. That was amazing. And today we have another baptism, actually Jude's good friend Marcus. Marcus, I'm sure they'll talk about how they know each other and all that, but I just want to say we're really excited for you, man. And we can't wait to see it happen. Hopefully you're in Philippians 3, and I want to give a little story before I read this. If you're joining us for the first time today, or the second time, or you're early in your joining of us, last week we were in Detroit with the East region, kind of our sister church over there, and so we kind of took a detour from our year in the parables. Every Sunday we're looking at a parable. We're going to continue that detour, not because it was originally planned, because that's the way God planned it this week.
Nice.
And basically what happened is last week or 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to speak in Lansing, and where Eastman met Jude actually, and it was encouraging. I felt good about the time. And then this last week, it was kind of a weird week, because originally I wasn't planning on speaking, because I think it just wasn't in the cards, or wasn't on the schedule. And then I was, and then my little sister gave birth to my new niece, which I was going to show you a picture, but I'm not going to because I forgot. But she looks like a little human being that just became a new person. And I don't know if you've ever had the privilege of being a part of the infancy in a child's life, the first couple weeks, perhaps a younger sibling, or obviously a child, but it's really amazing.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I ever held a newborn, and I had never held something so precious, never been so terrified in my life. It was a lot more scary to hold somebody else's infant than my own, because I was like, don't drop this child. That's like the only thing I'm thinking about. For some reason, when I was holding Rowan for the first time, my son, I didn't feel that way. I was like, there's no way I'm dropping this child. But so I was planning on going. I was supposed to be there today, so I asked somebody else to speak kind of last minute, and then I got sick the day before. You cannot be around children even if you have like a sniffle. Right. Like a baby, 8 days old. What's ironic about this, so I had to cancel the trip, I had to move the trip, which was really fun. What's ironic about this is that I've been sort of getting a little cocky about how not sick I've been getting. This year, if you don't know, I have 3 children, my wife and I have 3 kids, they're 8, almost 6, and 2.5, and it's just like a petri dish. Right. It's just ridiculous. And it's not like we all get it at once. We just cycle through it for maximum length of sick time. Absolutely. And so my whole family's gotten sick like 3 times. And I have just been, I have not gotten sick. And I haven't done anything to make that happen. I just haven't gotten sick. And so after a while, people will be like, oh, I've been sick, I don't want to hug you. And I'll be like, I don't get sick anymore. It doesn't happen to me anymore. So don't even worry about it. So I started to get kind of cocky. And then on Wednesday night, we're doing campus camp. We were hosting like 35 people. And I was standing in front of the grill. I had been cooking for about an hour and a half. And for some reason, well, actually I know why now, the grill was smoking like crazy, just pouring into my face for like an hour. And after that, I started to feel like, I don't feel great. But I just rejected the thought that it was even possible, because this is now an impossibility in my life. Like, surely not now. And so I went to bed and told them out. I didn't tell anybody I was not feeling. And then I woke up Thursday and I still didn't tell anybody. And then by about 10 a.m., I was like, okay, I think that I have to concede I'm sick. And it was really a bummer, because I had all these plans, and so I kind of threw the plans out the window, and then I was like, well, we're supposed to be doing the parables, so do I put some time into another sermon that I haven't put time into? And I just decided not to do that. So I took it off the other person's plate, because it's really my responsibility. And I'm going to offer a sermon that I offered a couple weeks ago that I think is chock full of meaning, but it does detour us from the parables. So forgive me that. But the title of the sermon is The Forge. Philippians chapter 3. We're going to start in verse 7. This is such an incredible passage, and we don't have time for the context. All I will offer you is that it's Paul talking about what it means to know Jesus, which of course is the reason we were talking about the parables at all, right? So in that way we can make it work. In verse 7, Paul says, whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. He says, before I knew Christ, the things that used to mean things to me, they don't mean things to me anymore. What I used to get my value from, how I used to cope, how I used to feel happy, those things actually don't make me happy anymore. They're not my aim anymore. Verse 8 says, what is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them garbage, that I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which is through faith in Christ, the righteousness that comes from God on the basis of faith. Now, as amazing as those verses are, the one I want to focus on is coming up right here. I want to know Christ, yes, to know the power of his resurrection and the participation in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, and so somehow attaining to the resurrection from the dead. To become like Jesus, you must do many things, but you cannot fail to include the necessity of suffering, which is kind of a bummer. Yeah. For a long time, I struggled to understand this verse. I don't know if I'll claim that I fully understand it now. But when Paul says, I want to know Christ, and I even want to participate in his sufferings, because that's how you really know Christ, I'm amazed by that, a little confounded by it, and a little intimidated. But I find that the more life that I get under my belt, the more I feel like I intuitively understand what he means. And I'll speak to some of that. He's not saying I need to suffer in the same exact way as Jesus. I don't have to go through all the same things as Jesus, who of course went to the cross, was tortured, faced incredible pain physically. Perhaps some that might happen too, but most likely not. It's not that we are to suffer the same way, it's we're to suffer with the same attitude. Perhaps the most well-known and well-documented display of human cruelty and suffering in the history, at least modern history, is the Holocaust and the concentration camps that came with it. The German Reich carrying out against millions of innocent people genocide, primarily against Jews and other marginalized people that they thought weren't a part of their Aryan race. Stories abound. This is pretty fresh history, right? Stories abound of families being ripped from their homes in the middle of the night and torn apart, never seeing each other again, thrust into their exile. People crammed together shoulder to shoulder into trains, transported like cattle to labor camps over days with nowhere to go to the bathroom, nothing to drink, nothing to eat, to these remote parts of the European countryside. They were subjected to cruelty almost beyond imagining. If you've never read a biography about it, just get your stomach ready. It's pretty intense. I won't go into too much depth. They were starved, dehydrated, beaten. Many would die from exposure, freezing to death, clubbed to death. Millions were executed in the gas chambers, lined up and shot. The Germans found the fastest and cheapest ways to kill people, and then they carried it out. According to one autobiography, which I'll speak about some, it is estimated that only 1 in 28 people would survive these horrific conditions in the concentration camps and make it until their liberation by Allied forces when the war concluded. That's 3% of those taken into captivity. 3%. One cannot help but wonder what it was about those 3% that did survive. Why did those people survive? You could say random luck, and surely, to a certain degree, that's true. But was there something in particular that set these 3% apart? There's a book that I read when I was in a fairly troubled time in my life called Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl is the author. He's a Jewish psychologist. He was 37 years old when the Nazis came and took he and his new wife and tore their... he would never see her again. She would die in another concentration camp sometime later, and took him to a concentration camp. Viktor Frankl survived 3 years in 4 different concentration camps, including the most famous, which is Auschwitz. 3 years. He wrote an autobiography called Man's Search for Meaning, in which Viktor Frankl is the inventor perhaps not the right word, but he's the creator of a type of therapy called logotherapy. And logotherapy is the idea that what everyone needs to get through any mental health disorder or anything, it's not this simple, but to simplify it is they need meaning. They need a purpose. They need a reason to live. He said, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. And what's wild about this quote is that you'll see below that it's not Frankl but Nietzsche, who is probably the most famous atheist of all time. Even Nietzsche understood this. That if you want to survive anything, you got to have a why. And Frankl would notice in the concentration camps that those who lost hope were the quickest to perish, basically giving up on life. Perhaps you've known someone or heard stories of a grandmother holding on, clinging to life until her granddaughter came to say goodbye. This is a real, documented physiological phenomenon. People can cling tenaciously to life when science is saying you're going to die, and they're like, but I'm not though. I'm waiting for something. The human will is strong.
Yeah.
He noticed people would cling tenaciously to life while others would give it up. Many people chose to take their own life. And you could perhaps understand why they would. Because they were hopeless. But others would not only cling tenaciously to life, but would actually hold on to their ability to display compassion. Mm-hmm. Look at this quote. Excuse me. We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the hut comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, this last of human freedoms. What is it that Viktor Frankl said you cannot take from a human? Because when they were taken to these camps, everything was taken from them. They were stripped naked and given basically a rag to cover them, and they had nothing. And he says, you can take everything from me except one thing. The ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. You can take everything from me, but you cannot take the way I respond to you taking everything from me. No matter what you do to me, you cannot control how I act. You actually can't take everything from a person. They can still be who they are. They can hold on to that. He would say later that in some way suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds meaning. I want to read to you, my little sister had this child, and I had just read this quote and I was feeling poetic. I wrote her a text. I won't read you the whole thing, but I don't know if there is a moment in life that more clearly demonstrates the truth of this than a mom giving birth to a child. Other than perhaps what Jesus went through, I don't think there's a greater display of this truth than that. I wrote to her. It was early in the morning. I was sitting in a locker room, and I was actually crying because my sister had given birth that morning at 2 a.m. After 30 hours of labor, God bless her. And I was just thinking I was remembering what it was like to see Rowan for the first time, my first morning. Halfway through, I said, it seems impossible you can love something so much and so surreal that it's happening. The bond between a mother and a child is unique. There will be no more important person in Aspen's life than named her Aspen. And they actually named her Aspen Noel after our youngest. Then no more important person in her life than you. I have no doubt that you will rise to the occasion. You will lose so much sleep. Make an amen from the parents. There will be times when you'll be so exhausted you literally can't think straight or see straight, and you don't care. The pain you experience in a child's infancy as a mom would be considered suffering in any other circumstance. Recovering from the physical trauma of labor, sleep deprivation, the emotional upheaval, the hormone craziness. And yet, it seems to me that suffering ceases to be suffering, quote Frankl, the moment it finds true meaning. I've rarely thought of the pain that comes from being a parent as suffering. Instead, it is more adequately described as sacrifice.
Yeah.
When suffering finds meaning, you no longer think of it as suffering.
Yeah.
The word changes.
Right.
You call it sacrifice.
Yeah, that's good, bro.
Which is the truest expression of what it means to love someone. You don't know if someone loves you until you measure how much they've sacrificed for you, or how much you think they're willing to sacrifice for you. What one person views as suffering, the follower of Jesus sees as sacrifice. Even those things that aren't really obviously like a mom giving birth to a child. For example, my sickness this week. It's not the same thing as like if someone was, going to take Shenny down, and I said, no, take me instead. That's obviously, well, I'm suffering on his behalf. It's sacrifice. And so you're like, well, yeah, obviously that. Like a mom giving birth, that's a beautiful thing. But what about just when you get sick in a week? You call that sacrifice? That depends how you suffer.
Right.
Yeah.
Suffering will always find meaning if your perspective is right.
Right.
And that's what we're meant to learn from Jesus. Perhaps the thing about Christianity that's most upside down about the way the world thinks is the idea of how we process suffering.
Yeah.
And there's probably no more clear verse than James 1, right? James, the brother of Jesus, says, you know the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. This starts by saying, you're going to suffer, but when you do, suffer well.
Yeah.
You're going to have hardship. You're going to have difficulties. And when they come, think of it as your faith being tested. That's what's happening. You're growing.
Right.
Or you're regressing.
Yeah.
I've said this before, but pain perhaps is the only thing that makes you do something. Like you can't non-react to pain. Like it affects you some way, right? You can be tough and kind of soldier through it, but usually pain is polarizing, right? Pain, difficulties, suffering, it either embitters you and makes you regress spiritually and relationally, or it transforms you and it strengthens you. Jesus and Paul both understood that life is not made unbearable by circumstances, but only by a lack of purpose and meaning. It's why he was able to go to the cross. It's why when you read about Paul's life, you can make the strong argument he suffered more than Jesus. Right? And at one point, when Paul goes from basically a Christian terrorist in that he's killing Christians and he's rounding them up, and he becomes a Christian, God talks to Ananias, who's the guy who helps bring him to Jesus. And he says, Ananias, I'm going to show Paul how much he has to suffer for my name. It's like, bummer. You know what I mean? That's not what you want to hear when you come out of the waters of baptism. I'm going to show you how much you're going to suffer. You know? No one's going to say that to you, Marcus, today. But no great person becomes great without suffering.
Wow.
Yeah.
You cannot be great without suffering well. Any great man or woman who we think of as great has suffered. And all these people have understood. Viktor Frankl understood. Jesus has taught us for millennia. Something Paul understood. That suffering is the crucible in which faith is forged. You know, a crucible is basically a type of metal container that a blacksmith will use or a metal worker will use, that you heat a metal to its melting point and you pour it in the crucible and it holds it, and you keep heating it until the metal separates from the impurities and they travel kind of different directions, right? One seeps out. That's the way your faith is sharpened and shaped. Suffering is that crucible. When life is just good, you can grow. But generally speaking, the greatest moments of growth and faith transformation don't happen when life is just awesome.
Yeah.
I love those times. And God gives us those times. And what's interesting is the more you choose to suffer well, the less you'll need to suffer.
Yep.
Some people, because they don't know how to suffer well, they suffer a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because their thresholds are very low.
Right.
Right? What they might call suffering, someone else stronger wouldn't call suffering. This is what sets that 3% apart, right? Not the absence of suffering, but learning how to suffer well. That's what makes somebody great. And there may be no greater authenticator of a genuine faith or an exposer of the fragility of somebody's faith than how you react to suffering in your life, whatever that may be. Psychological, mental, emotional, relational, physical. And perhaps the first sign, to make it really practical, the first sign that you maybe need area to grow in this area is the more you complain about your hardship, the weaker your faith is. That's generally a correlation. Now, even the strongest have moments where you're like, ooh, that was not a good moment, right? And you do complain. But I think that it's been said before, it's true that because of how much luxury we live in, each kind of succeeding generation, especially that grew up in a first world country with affluence and general comforts and luxuries that the rest of the world almost can't even imagine,
Right.
our threshold for suffering starts a lot lower than someone who was... Now, for those of you who have been in poverty, you have probably a higher natural threshold, right? Like the idea for you of not being able to eat kind of whatever you want whenever, like that's not a crazy thought to you.
Right.
Maybe you grew up in that, but for those of you that didn't grow up that way, I grew up in more of a middle class home. Not having kind of whatever I really wanted to eat, bar like I wasn't going to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse every night. You know what I mean? Like there were limits. There were times when we were pinching pennies, but for the most part, it wasn't that way. How you grew up definitely determines part of your threshold, but anybody can become great and learn how to suffer well.
Yeah.
It's part of what it means to be a Christian, despite your circumstances. But a lot of people in our day and age, we don't know how to suffer well. And I want to offer you a quote from one of my new favorite authors. Her name's Noelle Marion. She says, because we don't know how to suffer well, we suffer loudly. Wow. We are drowning in puddles when we should be learning to swim in oceans.
Yeah.
Isn't it true that perhaps you know someone, perhaps this person is you, where there's a lot of loud complaining about how hard life is, and in your mind you're like, dude, you're in a puddle right now. Just step out of it.
Yeah.
Because you see this person over here who's just swimming in an ocean,
yeah,
and they're crushing it. Mm-hmm. And then this person who's drowning in a puddle. Just pick your head up. Mm-hmm. They haven't learned how to do that, so it's loud. Wow. It's so hard, and I think about kind of as you grow up, one of the things that makes someone mature is they learn how to suffer better, even in little ways. I'll give you an example. The other day, I was just like yesterday, I was doing some housework, which whenever I do housework, it always takes longer than I ever think it will.
Right.
No matter how high I bump the time estimation. I'll be like, Kristen, I think it'll take me like 45 minutes. I should immediately say, let's add an hour. Because it's never at like I think it's going to be. Right. And I don't have a background in like construction or anything like that. So something as simple as like fixing the drywall curtain, it's like, game time, baby. Go get the tools, And so I went up, I was fixing this curtain, and I was done, and I felt pretty good. It was probably sub-hour, which was great work for me. We'll see how long it lasts. And I put the screwdriver in this bag, but I didn't realize there was a big rip in the bag. So the screwdriver fell right through and just smacked me in the foot. Now, it didn't hit me with the pointy end.
Nice. Okay, good.
I didn't say that at first because I wanted you to have empathy for me for like a second. But it was a particularly heavy screwdriver. It's one of the ones that you like load up the back end and twist it in. So there's a lot of weight. It just bam, right on that bone on the top of my foot. And Kristen was right there. So I had incentive to react with more toughness. I wanted to scream. It hurt really bad. Instead I just went and I slowly lowered myself to the ground and laid down and just heavy breathing for a little bit. Which I felt great about. I felt like I'm getting, this has got to be husband points, right? Like, I'm not like, it hurts so bad. I'm just like, I wanted to be asked like, how bad? I wanted to be like, it's an 8. Because it was like, it seems like it's not because of how tough I was being. But I wasn't always like this. When I was a kid, I didn't react well to pain. And I remember one story, actually I don't even know if Kristen knows the story. I remember it the other day. I was playing in the backyard of my friend's place, and the next door neighbor had a pretty vicious sounding dog. And I don't know, in my mind it was like the dog in Sandlot. It's dating myself. I've seen the movie Sandlot, there's a big scary dog. And the ball went over the brick wall. And so I was like, all right, I'm gonna get it. And my friend's like, don't do it. And you have to understand, like, it's not like I'm the guy that would do that. Like me at like 10, first of all, I usually can't jump over a brick wall. It was a shorter brick wall. And I'm just like not that guy. Like some of you were that guy, you're like, yeah, that guy would have done it. But like not me. I would be the guy that's like, no, let's call a parent. You know what I mean? Like I'm that guy. Let's do it. I just had a moment of courage. And I was like, I'm gonna get it. And they're like, don't do it, dude. Like you're young, And I was like, I'm gonna do it. So I kind of like I went up on the wall and I couldn't see the dog. And then I saw the dog kind of come out, didn't see me, and kind of turned around and went behind the house. And so the ball was right there, and there was a gate right there. So I'm like, I'm gonna do it, and I did it. My friend was like, no, And I jumped over, and as soon as I hit the ground, the dog it was waiting for me. Like you could sniff it. It started moving when I was in the air. I saw it turn around, I was like, no! So I hit the ground, I grabbed it, and it's like not worth it. This isn't like a ball signed by Messi. It's like a stupid dollar store ball. But it was just a moment of courage. I grabbed that thing, and I ran. He was chasing me, and I closed the gate. And the dog got my shoe from inside the gate. It was one of those gates that just had the bars.
Right.
And my foot somehow made it here. And the dog bit my foot. Now, it missed my foot. Have I told you this story before? This is real. They're not mine. And the tooth went into my shoe, but like on the edge. And it was And I just started weeping. like ugly crying. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Right,
you know, sometimes people cry and you're like, I'm so sorry. And then sometimes people cry and you're like, can you tone it down? Like it was like that. Like there was this woman at my older sister's wedding who, it's sweet when people cry at weddings, right? Like Carla got married last week and they were definitely I know Emily cried a little bit. Like it was beautiful. And but at my sister's wedding, there was one of her best friends was it was her maiden of honor, and she was like really, really crying. And I remember thinking that's too much though. Like, you know what I mean? Like just let it calm down. Like you don't have to. But I was like, oh, you know, and it didn't hurt. I was just scared, and I mean, my friend thought I was getting eaten alive. I was so terrified, and the thing is, I was overdoing it because I wanted to be heard. I remember that well. Have you ever done that before?
Yeah.
I'm like, this actually isn't hurting, but it looks like it should hurt. And if I cry like it should hurt, I'm going to be treated like it did hurt. Do you guys think with me there?
Yeah.
And I think we do this sometimes with our life.
Yeah.
Like something happens and we're like, you know what, I'm probably fine, but because we want that, maybe there's insecurity, we want that sympathy from people, we don't get enough from God, we have weakness, we have fragility in our character. We need people to give to us, and so we're loud, and we drown in puddles. Now what happens, oftentimes, as you grow, is that you learn to swim in more suffering like that. And it's amazing. The people I'm particularly amazed by are some people that suffer chronic pain. We have people in this room that would literally don't want me to tell you who they are, because they don't want people to know how much they hurt day to day. You would never know. It is my ambition to become like those people. To suffer well. To be the 37-year-old Kyle who dropped a screwdriver and just takes it on the chin. And not the 10-year-old who was getting viciously attacked by the neighbor's dog. With no pain, just fear and the desire for empathy. When we get our security from people, we're going to suffer really loudly. Because we're not really computing or embracing that God is the one who's going to strengthen you, who's going to comfort you, and love you. Now, he often does that through his people, right? And I'm not saying, stop crying, you know what I mean? Your life's so easy. Some people have super hard things going on. I'm not saying don't cry. I'm not saying don't go to people for comfort. I think you know what I'm saying. Perhaps it takes maturity to process it, but process that well, right? Do you suffer well? What does it mean to suffer well? A couple things, and we'll come in for a landing in a moment here. What does it mean to suffer well? A couple brief ideas. One, you develop a perspective of patient trust rather than immediate frustration. Something bad happens in your life. This trip getting canceled in Nashville, I was pretty bummed about it. My older sister said something that really helped me. Something that Kristen actually often says. She's like, whenever this stuff happens, the timing is crazy and timing is so conspicuous. You haven't been sick for 5 months and then you get sick this day before you're supposed to go. She's like, I just assume God saved you from something crazy. I was going to get into a car wreck on the way or something like that. I was like, wow, that actually really helped me. Yeah, you're right. God knew this was going to happen. Suffering well means you're deeply committed to prayer rather than feeling the need to complain to others first. I think we should share with others once we've processed with God. I can tell usually when someone comes to me with a problem before they spend any time with God. Usually because I say, have you talked to God? And they'd be like, I can tell I haven't. You know what I mean? I indeed can. Because you're hoping I can give you the answers, but there often is no obvious answer to suffering. You just got to work it through with God. You need to work through with people too, but God first. It means having a surrendered heart as opposed to a fearful one. You get bad news, and you're surrendered about it because God already knew it was going to happen. Suffering well means you have a growing resilience and willpower instead of the development of a more fragile character. You become stronger. The two hardest things I've dealt with in my life, which are my facial tic and my daughter's ongoing health complications, have been the greatest bearers of good fruit in my life as well. They may prove to be over time the greatest source of blessing in my life. Wow. I won't speak about it a lot because I don't want to over-speak about it, but we found out, this is my youngest, this is Noelle, I've mentioned her a couple times, that's her in therapy, and her track is a lot different than her other siblings, right? It's going to be a lot harder. And I can't stop that. But I can develop her resilience, right? And this is just a cute picture of her praying. She's as spiritual as a 2-year-old gets, I guess. You know what I mean? I think about what we've been through with her, and even recent news that we continue to get about her health and diagnosis in life is going to continue to be complicated. I'm just like, man, like, every time I get more bad news, it's still hard, but I do feel like I already know God knew. You know what I mean? Like, and it's going to be okay. Like, we're going to be all right. Kristen's been really amazing in that time. She's helped me. And I think about 2 Corinthians 12, what Paul says. He says, that is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, difficulties, for when I'm weak, then I'm strong.
Yeah.
I want to end with a short story. A friend of mine, who was in his 60s, he led churches for some 30, 40 years, serves as an elder in Florida, was diagnosed with a terminal blood disease around his mid-40s. That's when I met him about 20 years ago. And about a year into my facial tick, I sat him down, and he's one of the most important people in my life, and I just said, hey, can you help me process this? I really want it to go away. I don't know why it's here. I'm having a hard time trusting God. And he says, I can't know what it's like to go through what you're going through, but I will tell you that I knew I had reached a point of surrender with God when instead of asking him why he gave me this disease, I started to thank him for giving me this disease. And I was like, I'm not there yet. You know what I mean? That's a year in. What I find is that in my current life, I have moments where I'm there. But I don't live there all the time. I have days when I wake up and I'm like, I don't feel grateful for my facial tick today. And then I have days where I have a great perspective. And it's just, there are days it feels like suffering, and there are days I don't even think about it, even though it's worse than some days. It is so mental for me. I'm sure you all have your thing. Like that thing that you wish wasn't in your life, that person that is so difficult, or that physical ailment, or that mental issue, or that past trauma, or whatever it may be, that current obstacle. How are you going through it? How are you viewing it? What would your closest, most honest friends say you were like when you suffered? Think about whether you want to ask somebody that question, right? That's a good one for you. It's not that you thank God for the suffering that you've endured necessarily. I don't want to belittle what the horrific things some of us have been through, some of you have been through, especially when done from other people to you. I don't think it's like, oh, God thanks that so that person did that. It's not like that. I think instead it's we learn to thank God for taking that evil and turning it for good in our lives.
Yeah.
That's what it is. God may not have wanted that terrible thing to happen to you. And while Satan would use that to embitter you, God would use it to draw you closer to him. The beauty of the upside-down nature of the kingdom. So I hope that you can turn your suffering around and see the good thing that God can make it. We're going to pray now for our Lord's Supper, and in a moment we'll sing a song in that time, and we'll close.